again, welcome, and we're going to move into the speech by David Buchanan. David has been studying Stoicism for several years now, and we had a book club discussion earlier, a couple weeks ago? About a month ago, about Marcus Aurelius and meditations, and so we were able to discuss some of the principles of Stoicism then, and it's clear that David knows a lot about this topic, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say. He's going to be talking mainly about Marcus Aurelius, right?
I'm going to give a kind of an overview of Stoicism and then talk about
more than just Marcus Aurelius,
yeah.
the whole gamut of Stoics. So with that, we'll turn it over to David.
All right. Well, so like John said, I have been studying Stoicism for a while now. Kind of go into like how I got into it, I guess. I used to call myself a Buddhist Mormon back before I had a faith transition, and then my beliefs kind of changed, and the spirituality aspects of Buddhism I didn't really jive there. So that kind of led me into researching other philosophies and things like that, and I kind of stumble into Stoicism because it has very similar aspects to Buddhism in that it's mindfulness and it's things like that. They have similar aspects to their philosophies, and Stoicism doesn't necessarily have a sort of spiritual aspect to it. So that's kind of how I got into Stoicism. And I'm by no means an expert. I just love to research and read and study it. Like I said, today we're going to be talking about Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, but I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of Stoicism. So, Stoicism is a very interesting philosophy. It's a philosophy of action. So most people, when they think about philosophy, they think about these guys that they're in the university and they're talking about, the meaning of this and this over here and the meaning of these, and they connect in this sort of meaning. That's not what this sort of philosophy is in any way. This is very much a philosophy of action practiced by everyday people. It's been practiced by slaves, it's been practiced by emperors, kings, presidents. The founding fathers were known to study Stoic texts and Stoic philosophy. It's really accessible. So anybody after today, if you want to get into it, it's really easy, especially with Marcus Aurelius, to just kind of pick it up, flip through it, read through it, and in my opinion, you'll feel great. Like it'll feel good to read that. And oh, that's a good point. There's so many things you can just pick it up and get going. So this is Marcus Aurelius. Well, a statue of Marcus Aurelius here. And so it's been, Stoicism was founded in the 3rd century BC by Zeno of Citium, I think that's how you say his name. Stoicism is named because they used to stand on the Stoa in Greece, and they would have these philosophical discussions. So that's where Stoicism came from. Well, the name Stoicism came from. So this is Zeno of Citium, and then there's two other ones that were really kind of the three main people in Stoic philosophy. You have Seneca the Younger, and Epictetus. So Seneca was around 4 BC to 65 AD. He was the son of a writer and a philosopher. He had a lot of, he kind of expounded on top of what Zeno was saying. And then Epictetus, he was a slave. And his writings were written down and published later, but he was never meant to be kind of this philosopher. He'd studied and he read and he was a slave, and we have his writings now. So the Stoic philosophy is kind of happened at the same time as Epicureanism, if you know anything about that. They have very similar ideas, but they're also different. They actually fought each other in what they thought was best. So Epicureanism, it's pleasure is the greatest good. That's their main idea of Epicureanism. And in actuality, Epicureanism, like pleasure, means coming from a place of knowledge and living modestly and limiting your desires, which if you look at Stoicism, it's very much the same things, but they were fighting because they thought that, this idea is better, no, my idea is better. Really, they were very similar. So Stoicism, there's not a whole lot of complicated theories about where you came from, where you're going, why you're here, any of that type of stuff. It's very much a philosophy of overcoming destructive emotions, living according to the nature, to laws of nature, and humility, and keeping ego in check. That's like the basics of Stoic philosophy. It's just like, life sucks, get over the emotions that are going to affect you. Like, there's a lot of things, we'll keep going, I'll talk about some of that stuff. So this is kind of what I said. The basic ideal of Stoicism is very simple, though it's not an easy way to live. You take obstacles in your life, turn them into your advantage, and control what you can and accept what you can't. That's the basic Stoic philosophy. So you're going to have obstacles in life. Take those obstacles and turn them into an opportunity. Control what you can control, and what you can't control, accept it. And that's kind of the high level. So why are we going to talk about Marcus Aurelius? So Marcus Aurelius is probably the most accessible of all of the Stoic philosophers. This book, this is a really cheap copy I got off Amazon for $1. But there's lots of different translations. This one's really basic. There's a couple other ones that are more translated into more modern English. They're easier to understand. But the meditations are what is called in Stoic philosophy of Stoic writings. Every day they have this idea of you wake up and you examine your previous day. The emotions you had, the obstacles you had, things like that. You examine your previous day, your previous week, things going on, and it's not like a negative, like, oh, this is terrible, life is hard. Like, it's very much like yoga or like meditation. That's why it's called meditation. You sit down, you analyze it, you break it down, and you think about it. So it's a very spiritual exercise, even though it's not like spiritual. But what's great about meditations is Marcus Aurelius was a god, essentially, right? He was the emperor, and in that time, he was essentially like, he could come in and say, this is the way it is, and everyone would have to do it. So you have the writings of this famous, the most powerful man in the world in his time. And the writings are fascinating. I mean, think about it from this perspective. If you were going to go to Amazon and look up biographies, right? You can find biographies of famous, powerful, successful people, and people buy them and read them because they want to know. We have this here from one of the most successful people in the world. And we can take those lessons into our life daily and practice those things. And the way I like to think about it is these are very these are like what he was striving for. And like compare that to like if you read like it would be like reading the daily tweets of Marcus Aurelius, kind of, right? Like these are like what he's thinking. Compare that to like what people are doing today, like Kanye West. Like nobody cares about that guy. Like this is where you're actually going to learn something. So I kind of highlighted. There's 3 or 4 different things that Marcus Aurelius kind of talks about, and I kind of compared it to what's going on in the world today. So Marcus Aurelius, he was emperor, and in here he talks a lot about his political ideals. He talks a lot about this one right here is probably the one that doesn't make any sense from an emperor's standpoint. He says the monarchy that values above all things the freedom of the subject. Like, he's the emperor. He shouldn't care about the peons down here, but he did. That was his idea, that was his political ideal. There's a couple other things in here that apply in lots of different places, but from a political standpoint, just in the way politics is today, these other quotes in here I felt like fit with what's going on politically. He was very much a man of equality. He wanted everyone to be on the same page, and as much as possible, obviously, there were still slaves and there was still this level, but he was very much an egalitarian as much as he could be. And I think that's something that is a breath of fresh air sometimes when reading some of this stuff. There's also this idea in all of Stoicism of universal connectedness, that we're all connected, either this local community, the state community, the global community, we're all connected. And we all have this, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but we all affect the global connected universe. So there's a couple of quotes from Meditations. This one right here: you participate in a society by your existence, then participate in its life through your actions. All your actions, any action not directed toward a social end, is a disturbance to your life, an obstacle to wholeness, a source of dissension. So like, just these are the types of things that you can read every day, and like, it will just, if you have a right mindset, like, it just blows your mind, the ideas that you can come from and work into your life. This is something that, because I did study Buddhism for a while, Buddhism has this idea called dependent arisings, that everything you do in your life is connected through somebody else. The way it was explained to me is, just you waking up and getting out of bed in the morning, there's hundreds of people that have touched your life before you have even realized it. The people that grew the cotton, the people that cut the crops, they shipped it to the manufacturer built the mattress, things like that. All those things are connected. And so like, the philosophy about this is, your actions have an impact. And so make sure that you're making the right impact. Mindfulness is a huge part of Stoic philosophy, and he talks about it a lot in here. There's so many things in Stoic philosophy where it's so much just about controlling your reaction. You're driving down the freeway and a guy cuts you off. You can have two actions right there, right? That person probably didn't mean to, but you can react in a negative way, or you can react in a positive way. But your day will then be ultimately different based on your one reaction, right? Like, so much of Stoicism is based on how you react to external stimuli. It's so much like, I can't control what you're going to do. I can only control what I am going to do. So, your boss comes in and takes credit for a project that you spent all this time on. You can throw a fit and get upset, or you can just say, yeah, we worked on that together. Let's, next time do even better. You can't like throw a fit all the time, because then it's gonna, that might actually have a worse impact on your life than if you just kind of, this is what it is, So there's some good quotes on here if you're reading them, but this is probably one of my favorites right here. How ridiculous and how strange to be surprised at anything which happens in life. Because the world is random, You can't have expectations of things that are going to happen and then have a bad, reaction to that, because so much is random and strange and ridiculous, So another big part of Stoic philosophy is this coming to terms with death. It's probably one of the hardest ones for people to kind of deal with within Stoic philosophy, because it is kind of depressing, where it's just it just kind of, there's a point in there where he talks about famous people, and he said, you know, they're famous, this person did bad things, this did this, but now they're all dead, so it doesn't matter. Like it's just like, it's just like life happens, and death is a part of life, and that's part of Stoic philosophy. You just have to accept change, and if that change includes death, that's what it is. This is probably my favorite quote from Marx is on death. The only thing that isn't worthless, to live this life out truthfully and rightly and be patient with those who don't. I think that right there is kind of an overarching idea of, just live right, live true, this is life, and be patient with everyone else because we're all in this together. And then we have obstacles. This is one. There's a book by a man named Ryan Holiday who wrote an entire book on this aspect of Stoicism called "The Obstacle is the Way." It's one of my favorite books. But he talks about every day you come up against an obstacle, and those obstacles will often lead you to a better opportunity if you dive through it, or instead of trying to go around it. So if you take an obstacle head on, grab the bull by the horns, as the saying goes, you will often lead to more growth, better opportunities, things like that, as opposed to like, oh, well, I hit a wall, well, let's quit on that and try something else. I think that's kind of the idea behind this. I really like this quote here: the impediment to action advances action, what stands in the way becomes the way. It's just the way is what happens. When you have the obstacles hit you, that's the way you have to keep going. You have to keep going in that direction. That's kind of the Stoic philosophy there. And now I'm going to talk to you about some famous Stoics that actually you probably have heard of. George Washington actually put on a play at Valley Forge about Cato, who was a Stoic. Thomas Jefferson, when he died, he had a copy of the writings of Seneca on his side table. John Stuart Mills, he wrote about this book right here. It is the highest ethical product of the ancient minds. Adam Smith, famous economist, he wrote a lot of books about economy, capitalism, and he said that Stoicism had influenced the interconnectedness of life, the interconnectedness of the universe that affected his theory on capitalism. Toussaint Louverture, I don't remember how to say his name. He was a former slave. He led the Haitian Rebellion, and he actually used to study Epictetus, which makes sense because Epictetus was a slave. Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt carried through him on his 8-month journey through the Amazon this book and a copy of Epictetus' writings. One of Teddy Roosevelt's famous quotes that kind of jives with Stoic philosophy is, "A man doesn't need courage, but needs nerve control and cool-headedness." And that's very much a Stoic idea. And I'm going to end with a kind of a quote here from Henry David Thoreau. Kind of ties in here with what I think what the philosophy of Stoicism has. He says, "To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, nor even to found a school. It is to solve some of the problems of life, not only theoretically, but practically." So, that's all I got.
We have about 12 minutes for Q&A or questions.
Yes.
What is a stoa?
A Stoic?
Stoa.
A stoa. Yeah, it's Greek for the pavilion. Yeah. So they used to sit in the pavilion, they used to discuss these ideas. That's where Stoicism came from.
So a big part of this philosophy is accepting things that you can't change, right? I struggle with knowing when to just accept something or when to keep fighting and looking for solutions. Because sometimes you can find solutions if you dig hard enough, or that's how innovation happens, is by people persevering. So is there any guidance in Stoicism as to when to just let it be and when to persevere and keep trying? Do you have any guidance for yourself? I think it's a hard thing to know, right? When to just accept something and when to keep.
I think that's why within Stoicism they had that daily writing where they would sit down and analyze, they would go over their emotions and the feelings, the thoughts from the day before or what's going on in their life right now. And I think that kind of clears their ideas of, should I keep progressing forward here or should I just accept this? And I think that's part of why they did that writing.
Oh, I was just going to say that I was talking to my husband yesterday about Stoicism, and he said it does have that aspect of being able to try to find things that you need to accept. But he said his impression is that Buddhism is more like passive, and Stoicism has that element, but it's more active, like as far as what it tells you to do in your perspective.
Yeah, I got into a discussion with someone once that they were just like, this is all just like you disconnect from the world and you just kind of live in your own bubble and just let it go. But I don't think that's what it is. At least not the way that I see it. It's very much like using those stimuli, the things that have happened, to influence yourself, so that when that happens in the future, you don't have a negative reaction the next time. At least that's the way I kind of view it and think like that.
So, one funny anecdote that you missed 2 weeks ago because we didn't catch it on the videotape. Kurt, when he started out his presentation, he says, Dave Buchanan's going to talk about Stoicism in 2 weeks. The title of his thing is Life Sucks and That's Okay. Well, I'm here to say that it's not okay. That's how he started his thing. So both he and you at the book club kind of made this point that this philosophy that I espouse is close to Buddhism. Both Stoicism and existentialism have made that claim. What can you defend that Stoicism and the Buddhism?
I mean, I wasn't here for Kurt's talk, so I don't know.
Yeah, but like as far as your opinion of Stoicism and Buddhism, kind of connection, similarities. I guess we've already hit on one, that they're both very much accept life, the reality as it is.
Yeah. So I don't know much about existentialism, so
Okay,
I can't really argue that. But,
I know, I was wishing Kurt was here.
Yeah, he messaged me, said he was going to try and come, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know much about existentialism, so I can't really argue that. But just in my mind, because I did study Buddhism for a long time, this just kind of felt like a more proactive, less passive Buddhism without the spiritual aspects to it. But I don't, like I said, I don't know much about existentialism.
It'll be interesting in 2 more weeks when we have, or 3 more weeks when we have the secular Buddhist guy come talk. Then we get a 3-way fight going. Or maybe you'll all agree.
Yes.
I was just thinking, I had a customer come in where I work yesterday. I hadn't seen her for a while, so you automatically, well, how have you been? Well, not good. She said it's been kind of a rough year. Number one is her daughter and her husband got in a big fight. Her daughter disappeared, showed up 5 months later dead. And her husband refuses to take a lie detector test, and she doesn't have any money to do anything about it. Another daughter has moved in with her who cannot keep a job or be housed anywhere. She gets thrown out of every job and resident and so on. She said, I know she's mentally ill. She's so and I can't do anything about it until she either harms me or herself. And then my son called me to tell me his wife was
What I got from Marcus Aurelius in the Meditations is take a long view, right?
Yeah.
Almost to a fault. At some point I'm like, well, he's taking too long of a long view. We're all going to die eventually. Does it matter? You know, it won't matter to you eventually. So put it in perspective.
Yeah.
That's hard when it's that big of a deal.
I mean, one thing that I've found from Stoicism is this idea of, and Buddhism as well, is this idea of negative visualization, where it sounds ridiculous, but one thought experiment is like, if you can picture if your life is really, really bad, you can picture, say, for instance, that you get arrested for a crime that you didn't commit, and you get put in jail for 20 years, and you can't get out, you're just in a cell, and you're being fed food, but that's it, that's your only experience with humanity, then you would give everything that you have to get back to where you are now. And so it's a strange thing, but like you can visualize how much worse life can be, and that paradoxically like immediately makes you feel grateful for the state that you're in now. So I mean that situation sounds horrible. So right now I'm grateful that I'm not in that situation, but you can always push it beyond where you are.
In what facet of your life has the adoption of Stoic philosophy impacted you?
I think at work I'm less reactive when somebody comes and throws a big problem at me. I'm less reactive to my children when they're throwing a fit, things like that, where it's just kind of like just let it happen, and then I'm just a little slower to react, I feel like, in a lot of ways. As long as I am being that mindful. If I stop being mindful of what it is, then I am immediately just back to instant reaction and quick judgment. So, yes.
Isn't it, I guess when I'm thinking your comment about, we're all going to die anyway, it doesn't matter, and what keeps us on the rails? I mean, why don't we just, if I were to believe this and, really absorb this in my core, I'd say, forget everything. I'll just, quit my job and sell my stuff and, you know what I mean? So what keeps us on the rails?
So a big part of this is living a virtuous life, which would you figure out whatever your virtuous life is, you live that virtuous life to the end. That's kind of pulling it.
Now, when you say virtuous,
that's how ethical your actions affect everyone else around you, and so you don't want to affect those people. That's kind of and knowledge and wisdom and gaining that knowledge and wisdom, and that's kind of a virtuous life.
This is one of the things I got that was kind of a difference between Stoicism and Existentialism, is kind of inherent in Marcus Aurelius' writings. It seemed like there was a notion of a greater good, a noble, maybe philosophical, Plato-esque, Socrates-esque good out there that we're striving towards, whereas Existentialism says, it's all up to you. You figure out whatever you want to do. There is no greater good, no right and wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I know that can be interpreted religiously, but I think it can also be interpreted not religiously. For me, right now, it's interpreted scientifically. What do I think my purpose is for our species or something?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, like you said. But there is this greater good aspect.
Well, I just think of superheroes like Mother Teresa, Batman. Batman's virtue was justice, and he lived his life to serve justice. Just like people who are cops, not for the money, or judges. And some people take care of the poor, and some people just collect cars. It's like whatever your virtue is,
so I got to bring up this election cycle. And, we talk about the greater good, and then I look at the man that's running for president, and, how can I have a hard time in my mind looking that, people are virtuous and looking for the greater good when I see that are just out for everything they can get. And so how do you justify
Then
that?
you come back to, you can only control yourself and your actions, and hopefully your actions will influence everyone else's actions for the greater good.
Well, and how much as a society are we learning right now, for instance, about consent? In fact, I want to do a talk on that. You know, the horrible actions that came out that Trump had done, we're learning. We're going, a lot of people are opening their eyes. So maybe there is a greater good coming out of it. There's this NPR show that says, look, it was written last year, looking back on the Trump presidency, before he was even the candidate. And they're joking, you know, being as looking back from the year 2018 or whatever, it was a horrible thing for America, but it might have been what we needed. You know, it's like we learned from it. And wherever your political affiliations are, you know, I may hopefully learn from whatever happens in the next 4 years, no matter who's elected. Long term, it might be good for us. It causes us to make some reforms. You know, for me, I'm like, hey, this is a good year to push electoral reform, right?
Yeah, but then it also causes me to think, you know, that 40% of the Republican Party chose to vote for him. And that's daunting. And it's gonna,
It seems like the assumption with the Stoics is that people want to do the right thing, right? I mean, in general, and some of that's going to come from looking good to somebody else. So there's like a status in appearing to doing something virtuous, and so some people end up there's more motivation for them in the status aspect. So maybe they don't, or haven't been reflecting on themselves. Like, am I true to myself, or do I just like it, you know, to other people? Or can I hide the parts that aren't good? But I like how it's like, you know, it seems like if you're trying to figure out how do you get used to things that don't go well, and then find your virtuous life, like, it seems like, I like how it doesn't say the bad things that are happening to you are meant to be for a good reason. I mean, my impression is that it doesn't say like, you should be glad when these bad things happen, but you can still, like, because it was meant for you, like, because that was the right thing to happen to you to have a bad thing happen, because you otherwise wouldn't bring this. But you can still say, like, I'm creating my meaning, I'm gonna take this bad thing, and then if I can make it flower for me, or if I can, like, be more stoic than next time. So what you take from it, it's not like saying that the thing that happened to you was good or on purpose, but just that you can make your own meaning from it, and hopefully, like you say, like you're just gonna inspire people around you too. Because we do have that nature that we want. Like, why do people watch Upworthy or something, and then like get a little tear in their eye? It's like, if we can appeal to the better nature of everybody, then hopefully the rogue narcissist won't overwhelm the good impulses that people have that they want to do something right, they want to have meaning in their life and stuff.
Yeah, so just as you were talking, the thought popped into my head that a big part of Stoicism is keeping ego in check. And you kept saying, you know, I'm doing this to look good to other people, and that's actually a big part of Stoicism, is not doing that for the value of like looking good to other people. So it's more doing it because that's a good thing to do. So that's just what I took from what you were saying.
Yeah,
so.
because you'll feel good about yourself.
Right, yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Dave.